Hey guys, and welcome back to my channel. Today we're doing something spooky, kind of. Well, it is spooky, I think, anyway. It's a book video, so if you're into books, hi, welcome. If you're not into books and you're thinking about getting into books, hi, welcome. I definitely have some suggestions for you that I think are great first book reads. I think the first book really matters for when you want to get into reading, because if you start with a book that's just too much, that you're not into, that kind of drones on and on, that has a rough beginning, it can put off reading. You know, you're like, I don't want to read any more books if they're all like this. So I have some recommendations for good horror books for someone starting to dabble into reading. But yeah, I just have like a list here of books that are my all-time favorite horror books, because we are in October. Hello, spooky. Yes, the majority of them are Stephen King. I think I have two. I have two books that are not Stephen King. He's just the king of horror. He does horror so good. So I have my list here of the books I'd recommend if you're into horror, especially if you want to read spooky shit this Halloween. All Halloween, I'm reading Stephen King, and I'll let you guys in on what I'm reading currently and what I plan to read throughout the month. And yeah, so let's just go ahead and get into the video. I'm also not going to do this in any like particular order. I'm just going to kind of pick a book. I'm definitely saving my favorite book for last. But other than that, they're not like ranked from like worst to best or anything like that. So I think, where should we start? I'm like looking at my books. I don't know where to start. Let's start with Stephen King. And we're going to start with Pet Sematary. Now, if you've seen Pet Sematary, the movie, you need to read this book, because the movies, both of them, do not do it justice at all. This book is scary. When I read it, there were like parts where I'm like, oh my god, I'm like, I can't read fast enough. I'm like, I need to know what happens. And I'm like, chill. Like, this book gave me chills at one point. Like, it's just so good. The ending of this book is one of my favorite endings of all time. It leaves like a sense of like eerie, kind of like, oh my god. Like, I don't know how to explain it without like spoiling it, but the ending is so eerie and so kind of ominous that it's like you're left at the end like, oh my god. Anyway, so if you don't know what Pet Sematary is about, where have you been? Basically, it's about a burial ground that once you bury a body there, it comes back. So it's kind of zombie-like. Obviously, the body, when it comes back, is not perfect, not like how it was while it was living. It's definitely changed, and it is spooky, to say the least. I think this is a really great book if you're starting out reading, you just getting into Stephen King, especially because he's so heavy with descriptive words that sometimes, especially if you're just getting into reading, you're just kind of like, oh my god, this is so much to take in. Whereas I think this isn't like that. I think it gets to the story quick. I think that the details he puts in this book are very necessary to make it as scary as it is. So I would highly recommend this one if you're just starting Stephen King or reading in general. It's really good. It's very interesting. It's very scary. Love this book. The next book I have screams Halloween to me. We have Salem's Lot, also Stephen King. Salem's Lot is about vampires, basically. And I just feel like it's not Halloween without some vampire action going on. This is a really good book. I do think that this one has a little bit... Stephen King is like known for his over necessary descriptions of things. He's somebody who loves putting description and detail into his writing, which I like, but sometimes it's not necessary, and sometimes it's like, okay, can we get on with it, please? But this one, he does do that, but I think that it's another one like Pet Sematary where it's like necessary. I love this book so much, and I'm also not somebody who usually gravitates towards vampire books. They kind of turn me off because sometimes they're so cheesy and sometimes they're just very predictable, whereas this one's not. And I just think this is like epitome Halloween to me. So I would definitely recommend this one for anybody. Oh, I will say that it's not like super scary. Like, I definitely wasn't reading it and felt like kind of nervous or anything. It's scary, but it's not like, it didn't like put me into this world like Pet Sematary did, but it's definitely spooky. Let's move on from Stephen King and do a different author. This is called Imaginary Friend by Stephen Chbosky. I don't know if that's how you pronounce his name. Looks like this. he wrote, you guys, let me see if I can find it, because I'm pretty sure it's Perks of Being a Wallflower. Yes, okay. He wrote Perks of Being a Wallflower. What? He wrote Perks of Being a Wallflower, which, if you don't know, get to know, is nothing horror. Not even. And I love it. I love it when authors go into a different genre and fucking kill it. I think it's great. I think it's fun. And this is so far from Perks of Being a Wallflower. It's not even funny. I love this book. I love this book. My brother, on the other hand, this is like the only book I recommend to him that he didn't like, which is mind-blowing. There's definitely an element in this book to fantasy, which can put some people off, and I think that's kind of what put him off. It's kind of like a childlike fantasy, so our narrator is pretty much a child. We're kind of like in a child's mind, kind of in a child's world. And this book is chilling. It gave me chills. It definitely scared me. It put me like right in there. I think if you aren't so much into like fantasy, like that would never happen, that's ridiculous, you might not like this. I really liked it though. It's very creepy. It's very weird. It's nothing like I've ever read before. So this is basically about a boy and his mother who are running away from an abusive relationship and end up in this town, Mills Grove, I believe is what it's called. And Christopher, the son, goes missing for 6 or something, a very specific number of days, and comes back changed. And it kind of follows that story and what happened to him, what's going on in his mind, what's going on with this town. It's very creepy. It's very, like I said, kind of like dreamlike, fantasy-like. It's very good. I would recommend this. This is also, it's kind of a thick book, so it might be a little intimidating, but it is really, really good. It's also a very quick read. It's not so heavily detailed that I feel like, and maybe this is just me, how I read, but when a book is so heavily detailed and descripted, sometimes I feel like it goes by slower because I'm like trying to take in all these things. Whereas books, when they're like point, this is what's happening, I kind of blow through them pretty easily. Whereas I think this is a book that you can blow through really easily. Though it is thick, you can get through it fast because it's not like too much going on. It's meaty, but it's meaty with what needs to be. It's not filled with unnecessary descriptions, if you know what I mean. I have 2 books I'm going to share with you. They both like go together. This is why I'm sharing them together. I have The Shining and Dr. Sleep. Now, if you have seen The Shining, the movie, and not read the book, and you're obsessed with, obsessed with that movie, don't read this book if you want that movie ruined for you, because I can never watch that movie the same again. That movie is awful. Stanley Kubrick did a horrible job. That movie is nothing like the book. It's not. It's awful. Especially, like, after I read this book, I was so pissed at the movie for, like, Stephen King hates that movie, and I was like, oh, I wonder why. But I totally get it. It's fucking awful. It's fucking awful. The book, however, is, oh my god, so good. I was not expecting it to be as good as it is. So if you like the movie and you don't want the movie to be like bad to you, don't read the book. If you love the movie and you love the characters in the movie, read the book because you'll love them even more. There's so much more depth to Jack. We understand more about him and kind of why things are happening to him, why his mind is working the way it works. Wendy is such a more intense character. She has more depth. She's a fucking badass in this book. In the movie, she's just a bimbo that screams. She's just that character, like, oh my god. Like, Wendy in the movie is annoying. Wendy in the book, badass mom. She's amazing in the book. And then little Danny, we have so much more information about Danny. We know more about his little finger friend. He's like, hello there. His friend, yeah. Way more information about him, way more information about the hotel in general. It makes more sense what's happening, like, because there's parts in the movie where you're like, I don't really understand what's going on, especially the ending. You're like, what is happening? Whereas in the book, it all makes sense. It all goes together. There's parts in this book that are so chilling that you're like, OMG, like, you feel like you're Danny and your dad's going crazy and you're like, what is happening? Why is this happening? What is going on? There's so much more like ghostly kind of activity happening. It's very, very good. It makes so much sense and you're so like, what was Stanley Kubrick doing? What was he doing? Now, let's talk about Dr. Sleep. Dr. Sleep is a really good book. I definitely prefer The Shining over Dr. Sleep. But Dr. Sleep basically follows Danny's life as an adult now. So Danny is now an adult, and it kind of talks about some of his struggles and how it led him to this town where he really kind of like puts his roots down and shit goes crazy. So this one is also, I feel, is way more fantasy than this one. This one's very like ghosts, very manipulating your mind, kind of drive to insanity, whereas it feels like that could happen to you. Whereas this one is definitely more fantasy like, but believable fantasy. I don't like fantasy where you're like, oh, that would never happen. This is definitely more realistic fantasy, and there's a lot of characters in this one. There's not that many characters in The Shining, but there are a lot in this one, and you really get to know them and feel for them, and it's a really, really good book. I really recommend it, especially if you read The Shining, you have to read Dr. Sleep. And then I did see the movie for this, because the movie came out last year, I believe, in 2019. So I did go see the movie, and I was nervous because if they were going to make a movie Dr. Sleep, right, they would have to follow the ending of The Shining, because spoiler alert, in the book, the ending to The Shining in the movie is nothing like the ending in the book. There's one huge crucial thing that happens in the book that doesn't happen in the movie, and that thing kind of translates to this book, making it a little confusing as to how they're going to adapt this book into movie form. I didn't know if they were going to, I assume they'd have to follow the movie, because it wouldn't make sense to have the Shining movie and then have Dr. Sleep and have Dr. Sleep follow the book ending as opposed to the movie ending. So I was really nervous about that, but Dr. Sleep's a really, really good movie. They definitely had to keep bits of the ending that The Shining had into this new remake of the book, but they did it good. They did this book justice, I believe. The book's always better, but they did justice. I will say that much. The movie did the book justice. The movie was good. So yeah, if you're going to read The Shining, you have to read this. If you don't want the movie ruined for you, The Shining movie ruined for you forever, don't read it. But also, like, it's so much better than the movie. Read it. The next book I have here is one that I read most recently. I read this in September, I think. It's called The Shadows. This is by Alex North, somebody different. This is my first time ever reading one of his books, and he is a great writer. I don't know if he is influenced by Stephen King at all, but from his writing, I remember reading it and thinking, wow, he seems like he's heavily influenced by Stephen King's writing style. And he also referenced Stephen King, either Stephen King or one of his books. I'm not sure. Now I can't remember. But he referenced something about Stephen King in the book once or twice. And so I am now even more so like, was he influenced by Stephen King? And that's not a bad thing. Like, I think it's cool when you can notice somebody else's writing style influencing another author. It's pretty interesting. But anyway, so this has like that spooky kind of vibe that Stephen King just naturally has in his writing. And it's a small size. This is a really, really great starter book. It doesn't have too much descriptive details that take up big chunks of the book. This is a book that has past and present. So like one chapter is going to be about this guy's, our main character is a man, his past, his childhood, because what happened in his childhood is crucial to what's happening now in the present day. So you kind of flip-flop back and forth between his childhood and present time. And it's kind of like a murder sort of mystery, kind of, it almost has like supernatural feel to it as well. It has so many plot twists in it, which I love a good plot twist. This has multiple. There was one thing in this book that happened that I was just like, what? I was mind blown. It has like a childlike charm to it. Like, it has a little bit of an element of fantasy, but again, it's like realism, kind of realistic fantasy. It has a dream quality to it. There's a lot of talk about lucid dreaming in this book, which I really, really liked. There's just so much about this book that's so interesting, and you honestly don't know which way this book is going to take, like which path it's going to go down, because this is one of those books where I feel like he could rewrite this a couple times and have a completely different ending each time. It's just one of those books where you're like, okay, this could happen, but also this could happen, but also what if that happened? Like, it's a really, really good book. You kind of like start to come to your own kind of conclusion, then it's like, bam, nope, this is what happened. You're like, whoa, what? It's really, really good. I really recommend this one, especially if you're just getting into reading. This is great. The last book I'm recommending is a thick book. I was going to recommend It, but I will say if you've seen It Chapter 1 and Chapter 2, not the original is not good. It Chapter 1 and It Chapter 2, if you've seen the movies, I don't think you need to read the book. They're definitely, if you're a huge fan of the movies, I would read the books, because I think that you will really, you obviously like them. They're good books. But you get to see more of the characters. You get to see sides of the characters you don't see in the movie, or movies, I should say. So honorable mention, It. I don't think you necessarily have to read it, and it's a very thick book, and it's one of those books that are not easy to get through if you're not a avid kind of reader. It's one of those books that can kind of like feel like it's very slow in the beginning. So do what you will with that information. It's a good book. It's a really good book though. So this book is another one by Stephen King that's very thick, and it can be a little bit intimidating, but it's my favorite book of all time from Stephen King. It's so good. The Stand. It's a thick book. This also is the complete and uncut edition. So this book was originally published with an edited smaller version. It's definitely still a thick book, but it's definitely not this. I never read that version. I got the uncut complete edition, and this book is so, I'm reading it again. If you can see, I have my little bookmark in there. I'm reading it again. I love this book so much. Like, I can't even tell you how much. I had my brother read it, and like for like the beginning half, and like even like halfway through, he's like, I'm not into this book, Kaylee. Why are you making me read this book? By the end of the book, he's like, this is my favorite book of all time. And I'm like, yeah, it's an amazing book. Again, this is a little bit, I would think, harder to read if you're not already into reading. I think that big books like this, especially ones like this where there's a lot of characters, there's a lot of things that happen, there's a lot of details you have to remember, that it can be a little bit intimidating and a little bit hard to get through, especially because some of the beginning bits are a little bit slow to get through, because there's a big meaty half in this book that you're just like, oh my god, this is amazing. So the beginning can take you a little while to get there, and if you're not an avid reader, like I said, you might be put off by it, but this is worth it. I 100% guarantee it. So this is The Stand. It is about a virus that takes over basically the world, that kills 99% of the world. And as you might be able to tell, it sounds very much like what we're living in now. Thankfully, it's not as crazy as this super flu. Like, coronavirus is not that bad as this, but it's still bad. And reading this, like, and being in this time now is very like, oh my god, it's crazy. So basically, a virus takes over, most of the population dies, whereas some don't, and these people kind of come together in two sides, good, evil. It's very intense. It's very crazy. You start to like really feel for these characters. I mean, it's a big book and you meet almost all of these characters in the beginning. There's so many good characters. Like, they're all interesting characters. This is a book I'd highly recommend, especially if you're like a seasoned reader. If you read a lot, I think that this is a great book to sink your teeth into. I think it's a little bit harder for this to be like one of the first books you read when you're starting to get into reading, because it is so meaty. It is a lot of detail. It's a lot of characters, but it's a really good book. It's one of my favorite books of all time. It's my favorite Stephen King book of all time. It's scary. It's especially reading it now after this whole pandemic is going on. It's very realistic in ways. It's yeah, it's just crazy. It's a crazy story. So, The Stand. And that's all the books I have to recommend. I also kind of want to throw out some books that I'm going to be reading this October. Right now, I don't have it with me. It's in my car. I'm reading, what am I reading? Oh, I'm reading Thinner right now by Stephen King. Also, I'm probably like halfway through it maybe, and it is so creepy. Just the word thinner now is scary. Like the way he puts it in the writing, and it's just like thinner. I'm like, ooh, scary. So I'm reading that. I also just read The Langoliers, which I don't have that. My mom is reading it right now. That book is really good. It's about a plane going into like a time warp. Very interesting. The book I'm reading now, or not now, the book I'll probably read next is called Revival. It looks like this. And then I also have Lizzie's Story to get through this October. So I'm excited. Let me know what you guys think about my little recommendation list. If you read any of these books, what are your thoughts? If you have any books that you would like to recommend, leave them in the comments below for me and others. Let me know what your all-time favorite Stephen King story is, or just a horror story in general. And make sure you guys subscribe. It means so much to me when I get a new subscriber, so please consider doing that. And also let me know if you want to see more book videos. I have a couple on my channel. They definitely don't get as much attention as like maybe my clothing videos do. So I don't know if I should like keep making book videos, but I just love books so much. So sometimes I'm just like, I'm gonna make a book video. Let me know if you want to see more of these. I would love to do that for you. And yeah, like I said, leave your book recommendations down below, and your author recommendations, especially for horror, because I definitely want to branch out from Stephen King some more. I want to find some more horror authors as well. So let me know your recommendations, and I will see you guys in my next video. Bye!